Imagine, if you will, the soft hush of dawn settling over a stone-walled convent somewhere in the heart of medieval Europe. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of damp earth and old incense. Beyond the heavy wooden doors, the world is waking, but inside these walls, time seems to move differently. Here, the day begins not with the laughter of children or the warmth of a family breakfast, but with the tolling of a bell, a sound that signals the start of another day shaped by ritual, silence, and obedience. For many, the word convent conjures images of peaceful gardens, quiet prayer, and gentle nuns tending to their daily tasks. But for the children who lived within these cloistered walls, life was often far from serene. In the Middle Ages, convents were not just places of religious devotion, they were also homes, schools, and sometimes prisons for girls as young as 5 or 6. Some arrived as orphans, others as daughters of noble families, sent away for reasons that ranged from piety to politics. For these children, the convent was a world apart, a place where the rules of childhood were rewritten, and where the line between care and cruelty was often blurred. As the first light of morning filters through narrow windows, the youngest residents of the convent are already awake. Their beds are simple, straw mattresses laid on wooden frames, covered with rough woolen blankets. There is little comfort here, but the girls have learned not to complain. Complaints, after all, are not encouraged. Instead, they rise quietly, dress in plain linen shifts, and make their way to the chapel for the first prayers of the day. The air is cold, and their breath hangs in the silence as they kneel on the hard stone floor, reciting words they have memorized but may not yet understand. Discipline in the convent is strict, and the routines are unyielding. The day is divided into hours of prayer, study, work, and silence. For a child, the endless repetition can be bewildering. There are no toys, no games, and little time for play. Instead, the girls are taught to keep their hands busy, sewing, spinning, or copying texts under the watchful eyes of the older nuns. Every action is governed by rules, and every rule is enforced with a seriousness that leaves little room for childhood mischief. Meals are taken in silence, eaten from wooden bowls at long narrow tables. The food is plain, often little more than bread, thin soup, and the occasional piece of fruit. Hunger is a constant companion, especially during the long periods of fasting that punctuate the church calendar. For the youngest girls, the discipline of fasting can be especially harsh. Even on days when their stomachs ache with emptiness, they are expected to endure without complaint, to see their suffering as a form of devotion. But hunger is only one of the hardships that shape life in the convent. The girls are also subject to a regime of physical discipline that would seem shocking by modern standards. Corporal punishment is not uncommon, and even the smallest infractions can result in a sharp slap, a switch across the knuckles, or hours spent kneeling on cold stone as a form of penance. The nuns who administer these punishments do so with a sense of duty, believing that discipline is necessary to shape the souls of their young charges. For the children, the fear of punishment becomes a constant shadow, shaping their behavior and their dreams. Yet, for all its harshness, the convent is also a place of strange beauty. The girls learn to sing the ancient hymns of the church, their voices rising in haunting harmony during the daily offices. They are taught to read and write, skills that are rare for girls in the outside world. In the scriptorium, they watch as the older nuns illuminate manuscripts with gold and bright colors, turning simple words into works of art. There is a sense of purpose here, a feeling that their suffering has meaning, even if that meaning is hard to grasp. As the day unfolds, the girls move from one task to another, their lives governed by the relentless rhythm of the bell. There is little privacy in the convent, and even the youngest children are expected to share in the work of the community. They scrub floors, tend gardens, and care for the sick in the infirmary. The work is hard, and the hours are long, but there is no alternative. The outside world is a distant memory, and the walls of the convent are both a refuge and a prison. For some, the hardest part of convent life is the silence. The rule of silence, observed during certain hours of the day, forbids unnecessary speech. For a child, this can be bewildering. Questions go unanswered, laughter is stifled, and the simple joy of conversation is replaced by a heavy, watchful quiet. The girls learn to communicate with glances and gestures, to read the moods of the nuns and the unspoken rules of the community. In this world, words are precious, and silence is both a discipline and a burden. At night, as the convent settles into darkness, the girls return to their beds, exhausted by the demands of the day. The stone walls seem to close in around them, and the only sounds are the distant echoes of prayer and the soft rustle of straw. Some weep quietly, missing the warmth of home and the comfort of a mother's touch. Others have already learned to hide their feelings, to accept the convent as their world, and to find solace in the routines that shape their days. Yet, even in this world of discipline and deprivation, there are moments of kindness. An older nun might offer a gentle word or a secret smile, a small act of compassion that lingers in the memory. The girls cling to these moments, drawing strength from them as they navigate the challenges of convent life. For many, the convent will be their home for years, perhaps for the rest of their lives. The lessons they learn here, about obedience, endurance, and faith, will shape them in ways they cannot yet imagine. As the first part of our journey through the hidden world of medieval convents draws to a close, we are left with a sense of the complexity and contradiction that defined life for the children who lived within these walls. Their days were marked by hardship and discipline, but also by moments of beauty and grace. In the next part, we will delve deeper into the rituals and beliefs that shaped their lives, exploring the ways in which the convent sought to mold not just their behavior, but their very souls. If you're enjoying this exploration of forgotten history, I invite you to take a deep breath, let the quiet of the past settle around you, and prepare to journey further into the shadows of the medieval world. The story of these children is far from over, and the secrets of the convent are only beginning to unfold. As the days in the convent blend into one another, the children begin to internalize the rhythms and rituals that define their existence. The outside world, with its unpredictable weather and bustling markets, seems to fade into a distant memory. Here within these ancient walls, every hour is accounted for, every action prescribed. The girls learn to move quietly, to keep their eyes lowered, and to listen for the subtle cues that signal the next task or prayer. One of the most profound influences on the lives of these children is the concept of penance. In the medieval mind, suffering was not merely to be endured, it was to be embraced, even sought out, as a means of drawing closer to the divine. For the nuns, and for the children in their care, pain and discomfort were seen as purifying forces, capable of cleansing the soul and earning favor in the eyes of God. This belief shaped every aspect of convent life, from the food they ate to the clothes they wore. The children's garments were deliberately simple and uncomfortable. Heavy woolen habits, even in the heat of summer, scratched at their skin and weighed on their small shoulders. Shoes, if provided at all, were stiff and ill-fitting, designed more for modesty than comfort. The girls were taught to accept these discomforts without complaint, to see them as a daily offering, a small sacrifice that brought them closer to sainthood. Even the act of washing was regulated. Baths were rare and cold water was the norm, a reminder that the body was to be disciplined, not indulged. Perhaps the most striking aspect of convent life was the way in which the children were taught to view themselves and their place in the world. From the moment they arrived, they were reminded of their unworthiness, their need for constant vigilance against sin. The language of the prayers they recited was filled with images of guilt and repentance, of souls in need of redemption. The girls learned to examine their thoughts and actions with relentless scrutiny, to confess even the smallest transgressions, and to accept whatever penance was assigned. Confession was a regular part of life in the convent, and even the youngest children were expected to participate. The process could be intimidating: a dark, echoing chapel, the stern presence of a confessor, the pressure to remember and recount every misdeed. For some, the fear of forgetting a sin was almost as great as the fear of committing one. The girls were taught that even their thoughts could be sinful, that envy, pride, or a moment of anger required repentance. The confessions were often followed by acts of penance, extra prayers, fasting, or physical discomforts, designed to remind the child of her need for grace. The emphasis on self-denial extended to every part of the day. During meals, the girls were expected to eat slowly and in silence, focusing their minds on spiritual matters rather than the food before them. On certain days, they would fast entirely, or subsist on nothing but bread and water. The older nuns watched carefully for any sign of greed or impatience, quick to correct a child who reached for a second piece of bread or failed to finish her portion. Hunger was a test of willpower, a lesson in the virtues of restraint and obedience. Education in the convent was both a privilege and a burden. While most girls outside the convent would never learn to read or write, those within these walls were taught to recite Latin prayers, to copy religious texts, and to memorize long passages of scripture. The lessons were demanding, and mistakes were not tolerated. A child who stumbled over her words, or failed to remember a passage, might be required to repeat the lesson again and again, sometimes late into the night. The pressure to excel was constant, and the fear of failure weighed heavily on the youngest students. But the education offered in the convent was not limited to reading and writing. The girls were also taught the skills necessary to maintain the community: cooking, cleaning, sewing, and caring for the sick. These tasks were not presented as chores, but as acts of service, opportunities to practice humility and self-sacrifice. The older nuns modeled these virtues, moving through their days with quiet efficiency, their faces often unreadable behind the starched white wimples. The children learned to imitate their example, to find meaning in the smallest acts of daily life. Illness was a constant presence in the convent, and the infirmary was a place both feared and respected. The girls were taught to care for the sick, to clean wounds, and to comfort those in pain. But medical knowledge was limited, and many ailments were seen as tests of faith rather than conditions to be cured. The children learned to pray for healing, to accept suffering as part of God's plan, and to prepare for the possibility of death at any age. The loss of a friend or a beloved nun was met with solemn rituals, prayers for the soul, and a renewed commitment to the discipline of the community. The spiritual life of the convent was rich and complex, filled with rituals that marked the passage of time. The girls learned to celebrate the great feasts of the church, Christmas, Easter, the feast days of the saints, with special prayers and processions. But even these moments of joy were tempered by reminders of mortality and the need for constant vigilance. The shadow of sin was never far away, and the girls were taught to see every pleasure as a potential temptation, every comfort as a possible distraction from their higher calling. For some children, the convent became a place of genuine spiritual awakening. They found comfort in the rituals, meaning in the discipline, and a sense of belonging in the community. For others, the experience was one of isolation and fear, a daily struggle to meet impossible standards and avoid the ever-present threat of punishment. The difference often depended on the temperament of the child, the kindness of the nuns, and the circumstances that had brought her to the convent in the first place. As the sun sets and the bells toll for evening prayers, the girls gather once more in the chapel, their voices rising in a final hymn before the silence of the night. The day has been long, filled with challenges and small victories, moments of beauty and moments of pain. As they kneel in the flickering candlelight, each child carries her own burdens, her own hopes and fears, shaped by the unique world of the medieval convent. In the next part of our journey, we will explore the deeper psychological impact of this life on the children who lived it, the ways in which the convent shaped their minds, their relationships, and their sense of self. We will look at the stories of those who found strength in adversity, and those who struggled to survive in a world that demanded so much and offered so little in return. If you are still with me, I invite you to let your mind drift gently through the corridors of the past, to imagine the quiet footsteps of children long gone, and to reflect on the resilience of the human spirit in even the harshest of circumstances. The story of the medieval convent is not just a tale of suffering, but also of endurance, faith, and the search for meaning in a world of shadows. As the seasons pass, the children of the convent begin to change in ways that are both visible and invisible. Their bodies grow thin and strong from the daily labor, their hands become skilled at tasks that once seemed impossible, and their voices blend seamlessly into the choir of prayers that echo through the stone halls. But beneath the surface, deeper transformations are taking place, shifts in the way they think, feel, and understand themselves. For many of these children, the convent is the only world they have ever truly known. Memories of family and home fade with time, replaced by the routines and expectations of communal life. The older girls become mentors to the younger ones, passing down not just skills and prayers, but also the unspoken rules of survival. They teach each other how to avoid the sharpest punishments, how to find small moments of comfort, and how to keep hope alive in a place where hope is often in short supply. The psychological impact of this environment is profound. The constant emphasis on sin and penance, the ever-present threat of punishment, and the lack of affection or personal freedom all leave their mark. Some children become withdrawn, retreating into silence and obedience, while others rebel in small secret ways, hiding scraps of bread, whispering forbidden stories after lights out, or carving their names into the wooden beams of the dormitory. These acts of quiet resistance are rarely noticed by the nuns, but they are vital to the children's sense of self. Loneliness is a constant companion. Even in a crowded dormitory, the girls are often isolated by the rules of silence and the fear of punishment. Friendships form, but they are fragile, easily broken by jealousy, suspicion, or the intervention of authority. The nuns, themselves products of the same system, sometimes struggle to offer the warmth and understanding that the children crave. Their love is expressed through discipline, their care through correction, and their affection through the rare fleeting moments of gentleness that linger in the memory long after the pain of punishment has faded. The convent's approach to emotional life is shaped by the belief that feelings are to be controlled, not expressed. Joy, sorrow, anger, and fear are all seen as distractions from the higher calling of spiritual discipline. The girls learn to hide their emotions, to present a calm and obedient exterior, even when their hearts are troubled. Tears are shed in secret, laughter is stifled, and dreams are kept hidden, shared only in whispers with a trusted friend or written in the margins of a prayer book. Yet, even in this world of restraint, the children find ways to create meaning and connection. They invent secret games, using pebbles or scraps of cloth as tokens. They develop their own silent language of glances and gestures, a way to communicate without words. They share stories, some true, some imagined, about saints, miracles, and the world beyond the convent walls. These stories become a lifeline, a way to keep their imaginations alive and to remind themselves that there is more to life than the narrow path laid out before them. The convent's rituals, while often harsh, also provide a sense of stability and order. The predictability of the daily schedule, the repetition of prayers, and the cycle of feasts and fasts create a rhythm that can be comforting in its familiarity. For some children, this structure becomes a source of strength, a way to find peace in the midst of uncertainty. They learn to take pride in their work, to find beauty in the simple acts of service, and to draw comfort from the knowledge that they are part of something larger than themselves. But for others, the rigidity of convent life becomes a source of deep distress. The pressure to conform, the lack of personal freedom, and the constant surveillance can lead to feelings of anxiety, depression, and despair. Some children develop physical symptoms, headaches, stomach pains, or fainting spells that reflect their inner turmoil. The nuns, with their limited understanding of mental health, often interpret these symptoms as signs of spiritual weakness or even demonic influence, prescribing more prayer, more penance, and more discipline as the cure. The stories of individual children preserved in letters, chronicles, and the rare surviving memoir reveal the full range of experiences within the convent. There are tales of girls who found a sense of purpose and belonging, who grew into strong and compassionate women, dedicated to the service of others. There are also stories of those who struggled, who never fully adapted to the demands of convent life, and who carried the scars of their childhood long into adulthood. One such story is that of a girl named Agnes, who entered the convent at the age of 7. Her parents, unable to provide for all their children, saw the convent as a place of safety and opportunity. At first, Agnes was overwhelmed by the strict rules and the unfamiliar routines. She missed her family terribly and cried herself to sleep each night. But over time she learned to find comfort in the rituals of prayer and the companionship of the other girls. She became skilled at embroidery, her delicate stitches admired by the nuns, and she took pride in her ability to memorize long passages of scripture. For Agnes, the convent became a place of growth and transformation, a world where she could find meaning in service and devotion. Another story, less hopeful, is that of Isabella, who was sent to the convent as a form of punishment for her rebellious spirit. Isabella never accepted the rules of silence and obedience. She questioned the nuns, challenged the rituals, and refused to submit to the harsh discipline. Her resistance was met with increasing severity, long hours of penance, isolation, and even physical punishment. Over time, Isabella's spirit was broken. She became withdrawn and silent, her once bright eyes dulled by suffering. Her story, recorded in the margins of a nun's diary, is a reminder of the cost of conformity and the dangers of a system that values obedience above all else. The convent was, in many ways, a microcosm of medieval society, a place where the values of the time were enforced with unwavering certainty. The children who lived there were shaped by these values, for better or for worse. Some emerged stronger, their faith deepened by adversity. Others were left with wounds that never fully healed, their sense of self forever altered by the experience of life behind stone walls. As night falls once more, the girls gather for the final prayers of the day. The chapel is dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of wax and incense. The voices of the children rise in a soft, haunting chant, filling the darkness with a sense of longing and hope. In this moment, the hardships of the day fade into the background, replaced by the quiet comfort of shared ritual and the promise of another day. In the final part of our journey, we will look at the legacy of the medieval convent, the ways in which these experiences shaped the lives of the women who left, the stories that have been passed down through the centuries, and the lessons that can still be learned from this hidden world. If you are still listening, I invite you to rest in the gentle quiet of the past, to let the echoes of these children's voices guide you into a deeper understanding of resilience, faith, and the enduring search for meaning. As the centuries have passed, the stone walls of those medieval convents have weathered storms, wars, and the slow march of time. Many have crumbled into ruins, their gardens overgrown, their chapels silent. Yet the stories of the children who once lived within remain, woven into the fabric of history, waiting to be remembered. Their lives, shaped by hardship and discipline, by ritual and silence, left marks that reached far beyond the convent walls. For some, the convent was a beginning. Girls who survived its rigors sometimes found themselves better prepared for the world outside than their peers. They could read and write, skills that were rare and valuable. They knew how to manage a household, tend a garden, and care for the sick. Some became respected members of their communities, teachers, midwives, or even leaders within the church. The discipline and resilience they learned in childhood became tools for survival in a world that was often uncertain and unforgiving. But for others, the legacy of the convent was more complicated. The lessons of obedience and self-denial, the constant reminders of unworthiness, and the memories of punishment and deprivation could linger for a lifetime. Some women struggled to form close relationships, their ability to trust and express emotion shaped by years of silence and restraint. Others carried a quiet strength, a sense of purpose forged in adversity, but also a sadness that was hard to name. The stories that have come down to us are often fragmentary, snippets from letters, entries in old chronicles, the faded ink of a nun's diary. Yet, in these fragments we catch glimpses of the inner lives of these children. We see their hopes and fears, their small acts of rebellion, their moments of joy and sorrow. We see the ways in which they found meaning, even in suffering, and the ways in which they reached for connection, even in a world that demanded isolation. Some convents became known for their kindness, their commitment to education and care. Others gained reputations for severity, for the harshness of their discipline and the strictness of their rules. The experience of each child depended on many things: the character of the nuns, the wealth of the convent, the customs of the region, and the circumstances that brought her there. No two stories are exactly alike, yet all are shaped by the same forces of faith, tradition, and necessity. As the medieval era gave way to the Renaissance and beyond, the role of convents began to change. New ideas about childhood, education, and the rights of women slowly took root. Some convents opened their doors to the poor, offering shelter and schooling to girls who had nowhere else to go. Others became centers of learning, preserving knowledge through the dark times and passing it on to future generations. The harshest practices faded, replaced by gentler forms of discipline and a greater emphasis on compassion. Yet, even as the world changed, the memory of those early convents remained, a reminder of a time when childhood was often a time of trial, when faith and fear walked hand in hand, and when the search for meaning was shaped by both suffering and hope. Today, as we look back across the centuries, it is easy to judge the past by the standards of the present. We may feel sorrow for the hardships endured by those children, or anger at the systems that allowed such suffering to become normal. But we can also find in their stories a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to endure, to adapt, and to find moments of beauty, even in the darkest of places. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of their voices, the soft murmur of prayers at dawn, the laughter that slipped through the cracks of silence, the whispered dreams of a life beyond the convent walls. Their stories remind us that history is not just a record of events, but a tapestry of lives, each thread woven with care, each moment shaped by the choices and circumstances of those who came before. As you drift into sleep, let your mind wander through the quiet corridors of the past. Imagine the gentle footsteps of children long gone, the flicker of candlelight on ancient stone, the hush of voices raised in song. Remember that even in the harshest of times, there were moments of kindness, of courage, and of hope. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the hidden world of medieval convents. If you found this story meaningful, I invite you to share your thoughts, to subscribe for more explorations of forgotten history, and to remember that every life, no matter how small or silent, leaves a mark on the world. Good night, and may the quiet strength of those who came before bring you peace as you rest.